Hello friends, I'm back with the continuation of our previous video. Okay, yeah, so don't be like this guy in yellow. It's the same day, so okay, yeah. So earlier on, I stopped on Phillips curve. I stopped the introduction of Phillips curve, and I talked about some measures to control inflation. These are some of the measures which can be used to control inflation. There are those which are monetary measures, fiscal measures, and then other measures. Monetary measures are those which are concerned with the control of money supply. Okay, these are concerned with the control of money supply. And then fiscal measures are those measures which are concerned with taxation and expenditure. Okay, and then we have these other measures. Under monetary measures, we have those which are named with credit control, controlling the credit the banks can offer to people. Remember, when you control credit or when you reduce on credit, it means people will be having little money, and so they won't spend a lot to lead to demand inflation. Okay, there are other measures. Then you have the fiscal measures, um, cutting expenditure. Here, talking about government expenditure. Okay, so if the government expenditure is cut, some money will be flowing into the economy, and thus inflation will be controlled. Increase in taxes, reduce people's disposable income, increase in savings, or saving culture. When people are saving more, it means they are disposing of little income, and with that, inflation can be controlled. And many others, public debt, whereby we borrow money, the government borrows money from the public, like through bonds. So when the government borrows money uh, for its expenditure, then and for its good expenditure, that can lead to reduced money in supply, and thus control inflation. The other side, we have a lot of raise in production. When you raise production, it means now you're going to increase on supply. When supply increase, it can now match the demand, and thus inflation will be controlled. Yeah, price controls. The government at times should come in and put limitations on the prices. Okay, yeah, we're talking about those pricing regulations, the minimum and maximum prices, or price ceiling and price floor. So the government should put controls in place by setting a price for which seller shouldn't exceed while selling the products, and many others. So now I stopped on Phillips curve, and we said it's a curve which shows the relationship between inflation rate and unemployment rate. The Phillips curve is negatively sloped. Yeah, the relation between the unemployment rate and the short-term Phillips curve is negatively sloped, like you've seen. By being negatively sloped, it means there's a trade-off between unemployment and inflation. Yes, so those two are inversely related as per the assumption of the Phillips curve. Okay, so there's a trade-off between it, meaning if you have high interest rates, higher inflation rates, uh, you will be with lower unemployment rates. Or when the unemployment rate increase, inflation will reduce. Okay, yeah, that's the Phillips curve. Yeah, when the unemployment rate increase, meaning more people are unemployed, it means inflation will reduce. Yeah, based on that kind of relationship. Okay, all right. So here we're talking about how the relevance of looking at these two. Yeah, they are both not too desirable. Okay, uh, they're not that desirable in an economy, unemployment and inflation. So there's a need to understand the relationship as students of macroeconomics. Then there's this question: what happens if the Phillips, what happened in the Phillips curve diagram when there is a shift in aggregate demand? And this takes us to assuming there's a shift in the aggregate demand curve. How will the Phillips curve shift? So we're going to look at that relationship. Yeah, so that's illustrated by that graph. Shifts in aggregate demand and the Phillips curve. All right, so assuming there is an increase in aggregate demand from 81, okay, initially we were at 81, Okay, we're having aggregate supply 81, and at this point there is 102 price and output of Y1. Okay, so when there is an increase in output, or when there is an increase in aggregate demand, yeah, aggregate demand increases from 81 to 82, production will increase. Okay, aggregate demand leads to increase in production. Yeah, so output will increase from Y1 to Y2 altogether, and consequently, so we will now move from the equilibrium point A to equilibrium point B. Okay, so at equilibrium point A, the price was 102, and then with the output Y1. So now at our new equilibrium point B, the price is increased to 106. Okay, which is inflation, and then which indicates which results into inflation, and then output increases from Y1 to Y2. So this leads to movement alongside the Phillips curve from point A altogether. Point A, which had interest rate of 2 and a high unemployment rate, to point B with a unemployment rate of 4, which has reduced, and a higher inflation rate. I repeat, when aggregate demand increases from AD1 to AD2 altogether, output will increase, and when output increases, it means unemployment will reduce. When we are producing more, it means more people are employed, and thus the unemployment rate will reduce because more people will be employed. That's why you're seeing on the Phillips curve now will move from A to B. Unemployment will move from its initial point to 4% altogether, and then when it reduces, inflation will increase from 2% to 6% altogether. So that's the relationship explained there. The increase in aggregate demand from 81 to 82 led to increase in output and production, which resulted into a reduction in unemployment since more people are now employed, and then we have movements alongside the Phillips curve. Yeah, so even if the movements were inside for the AD1 aggregate demand, even if there was a fall in aggregate demand, it would be still a movement alongside the Phillips curve, but in the opposite direction. Yeah, it would be just the opposite direction, but as a movement alongside the Phillips curve. All right, so let's move on. So in the previous slide, as a result, the equilibrium in the economy moves from point A to B. There are two further things to note about the new equilibrium. I've explained all those movements in price from 102 to 106, and then output from Y1 to Y. So I've explained that. Okay. So now we got the long run Phillips curve. The long run Phillips curve is vertical. Meaning at that natural rate, which is fixed. In some countries like the US, it's at one. It's at 6% natural rate. Okay, so the natural rate, if it's say for the US rate, it's 6%. Those in control may decide on determining the inflation rate, but at a constant natural rate of unemployment. Recall we said natural rate of unemployment is that unemployment which comes in normal periods. Okay, when we are not in recession. Yeah, when we are not in recession, in most cases it's a low rate of unemployment. Yeah, compared to the cyclical one, which happens when we are in a recession, when the economy is not doing so well. So the long run Phillips curve form. You see the long run Phillips curve. It's vertical at the natural rate of output. Yeah, and then the other side is vertical along the natural rate of unemployment. Yeah. Okay. So the rightward shift in aggregate demand is associated with rising output and a rising price level. Yeah, just like we saw earlier on the first time we looked at the shifts in aggregate demand and the Phillips curve. We saw that when the aggregate demand curve moves to the right, the prices will increase, production will increase, and then unemployment rate will fall, and then the Phillips curve will shift or will move alongside. We'll have movements alongside the Phillips curve. Okay. Alright, so this expression is the same as the one we had earlier. So the ratio of shifting of business with the rising output as the rising price level increase the ratio of inflation. Rising output goes along with the rising employment. For this, we talked about all these reasons. The right word shifting of demand will cause a movement to point A or an employment. Yeah, we talked about. Yeah, so like you can see on the left, when the central bank reduces the growth of the money supply in the long run, the aggregate demand curve will shift to the left, causing the price levels to fall from P0 to P1. However, output is not affected by changes in the money supply in the long run. That's why you're seeing in the long run, output is not affected. Yeah, since output remains at the natural rate, the median unemployment will be determined at that point of the natural rate. Okay. So let me talk about expectations, the short-run Phillips curve and expectations. Here we are going to talk about the actual inflation and then expected inflation. Yeah. So there is that inflation we expect, and then the actual one which we realize. Like statisticians can sit down and maybe the Ministry of Finance at Bank of England and determine how they predict that we expect the inflation maybe in this month to be this, yeah, but that rate they put may not always be the one realized at that point. What we realize at that point is what we call the actual inflation. So you're going to see the behavior of the short-run Phillips curve when it comes to expectations and what we the actual inflation we realize. Okay, so while there is not a trade-off between inflation and unemployment in the long run, there's a short-run trade-off. In the short run, like we saw, there's a trade-off, whereas for the long run there is no trade-off. Okay, so from the work of Milton Friedman and Edmund Phelps, we know that expectation of future inflation plays an important role in the short-run trade-off. Okay, so our trade-off in the short run will depend a lot on what we expect inflation to be in the long. Yeah, so this curve it explains all the figure below this most demonstrate the relationship between the short run Phillips curve and the inflationary expectations. Okay, so what we should know is that SRPC1 illustrates or portrays a low expectations, yeah, or a lower expected inflation. Okay, and so as the expectation increases, we move outwards. So the increase in inflation expectation moves the short-run Phillips curve from point 1 to point 2. Yeah, and so we'll move from A to C. Our new equilibrium will now move to point C altogether. So when you look at that graph, so SRPC1 or short-run Phillips curve 1 illustrates a low inflationary expectation, and then SRPC2 illustrates a higher inflationary expectations. Okay, so when the expectation for inflation increases, we have those movements from Phillips curve 1 to Phillips curve 2. What yes, suppose the economy is initially at point A. Earlier we said a shift in the aggregate demand curve will cause a movement along the short-run Phillips curve. If you recall what I said on the other curve, yeah, that a shift in aggregate demand curve will cause a movement along the short-run Phillips curve. Yeah, we saw aggregate demand when it increased and output. When aggregate demand increased, moved the rate, and output increased, and then unemployment the other side reduced, and then we had an upper movement alongside uh, the Phillips curve. Yeah, so in this case, an increase in the money supply, an increase in the government spending, or a tax could also shift the aggregate demand curve to the right. Suppose one of these three occurs. So Friedman and Phillips puts it that when we have higher actual inflations, then chances are that even the expectation will be high. Yeah, so when the actual inflation is high, then will eventually cause expected inflation to rise as well. Yeah, so when we are currently having or when we actually have very high inflation, or we have high inflation, then we expect even the future actually we expect the future to be worse. So we expect inflation in the future to also rise. Okay, so like we said in the figure we had previously, yeah, so when there's an increase in expected inflation, yeah, the Phillips curve will shift to the right. Yeah, like we saw, it shifted to the right, and then we had our economy ending at point C. It shifted to the right up to point. Okay, I talked about this in the curve we had. Yeah, that the first Phillips curve explains it explains low expected inflation, and then the second short-run Phillips curve explains a high expected inflation. Yeah, I talked about this in the graph, in the previous graph, yeah, where we're having SRPC1, which is the short-run the first short-run Phillips curve, which explains a low expected inflation, and then SRPC2, which explains a high expected inflation. Yes. Yeah. So the unemployment rate is equivalent. Um, the unemployment rate is equivalent to the natural rate of unemployment minus A, which is actual inflation, minus the expected inflation. Yeah. So that's the relationship between. All right. Thank you. Yeah. So you can go and read more about the Phillips curve. You can read about the supply shocks and the Phillips curve. What happened in the Phillips curve when aggregate supply shifts? Yeah. Yeah. So we can read more about these shocks and the Phillips curve. You can take off some time and read more about the supply shocks and Phillips curve. Yeah. Thank you very much.